course. Item number 32 relates to the Barcroft Apartments at 1130 South George Mason Drive. Part A is approval of a $150 million county acquisition fund loan to an affordable housing provider to help finance the acquisition of Barcroft Apartments. And 32 Part B is the approval of a short-term financing credit agreement between the county, the Arlington County Industrial Development Authority, and PNC Bank to be used to finance the acquisition and installation of certain land, facilities, and equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Kushner. We're over to the manager for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. As I mentioned on Saturday, the item before you is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to preserve affordable housing for hundreds of Arlington families and thousands of people. This proposal embodies countless years and hours of effort and fulfills plans and directions from this board and your predecessor boards. We have funds available in our Affordable Housing Investment Fund to meet the annual debt service while longer-term planning takes place. And also, with a transaction of this size, the details really do matter. The last 2 months involved literally every day and night work by a talented and exceptionally dedicated staff team. And I wanted to offer my deep appreciation to the staff, Ann Venezia, who you will hear in a moment, Sarah Pizzo, Melissa Danowski, Mark McCauley, Jason Fries, Shannon Flanagan-Watson, Michelle Cowan, Ryan Helfa, and Erica Moore worked hard day and night and weekends. And it was all a labor of love and a labor that will have a profound and lasting positive effect on the lives of those who live at Barcroft. And as I told staff, that was the easy part. So with that, over to Ms. Venezia.
Ms. Venezia.
Hi, good, this is working. Thank you and good evening. That was quite an introduction, so hopefully this presentation will live up to expectations. So I'm Ann Venezia, I'm Arlington County's Housing Director, and I will be walking through the staff recommendations related to the acquisition proposal for Barcroft Apartments and commitment to long-term affordability. Next slide. First, the Barcroft property is located in the Douglas Park neighborhood in the Columbia Pike corridor. It spans over 60 acres and is a garden-style apartment community built between 1939 and 1953. It contains 1,334 units. It also includes 2 smaller commercial parcels. Next slide. Barcroft Apartments is the largest market rate affordable, or MARC, property in the county. A MARC means a unit that is affordable to low-income households as a result of current market pricing rather than local, state, or federal affordability requirements. In some areas of the region, this is also known as naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAH. This fall, a broker circulated a listing advertising the Barcroft Apartments for sale. The sale risked market rate development and displacement of current residents if purchased by a buy-rate market rate developer only interested in market rate buy-rate development. Instead, the acquisition by an affiliate of Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners includes a plan to commit all units to 99 years of affordability. To help this purchaser acquire the property, staff recommends approval of a $150 million line of credit, the associated county acquisition fund loan to the purchaser, and corresponding loan documents. To give some context for this project and its location, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan. The Neighborhoods Area Plan, which was adopted in July of 2012, represents the county's adopted policy guiding preservation and revitalization of the residential neighborhoods along Columbia Pike. Its goals mirror the previous vision established for the commercial areas of the corridor while also prioritizing housing and sustainability. The area plan is implemented through the 2013 Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, also known as Appendix B to the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance. While many portions of Columbia Pike are eligible for redevelopment, both documents strategically identified 2 areas considered essential for preservation, labeling them conservation areas. While multiple sites met the criteria for qualifying as conservation areas, the focus of the area plan was on rental properties which were at higher risk of redeveloping, specifically Barcroft Apartments and Fillmore Garden Apartments. Barcroft Apartments front George Mason Drive, south of Columbia Pike in the western half of the corridor, while Fillmore Garden Apartments lie just east of Walter Reed Drive, north of Columbia Pike in the eastern half. Portions of these apartment communities were specifically highlighted as conservation areas due to the historic resources inventory listing them as essential, and they contain significant amounts of affordable housing, open spaces, and mature trees. The proposed acquisition helps meet the goals within the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan approved by the County Board in 2012. The plan established the goal of preserving 100% of the 6,200 marks existing at the time along the Columbia Pike corridor. The units of Barcroft Apartments reflect a significant portion of that goal, as over 20% of the marks to be preserved in the plan are located at Barcroft Apartments. The preservation and renovation of the Barcroft community also meets many goals in the county's Affordable Housing Master Plan. First, it will prevent the loss of market rate affordable housing. The project also will provide family-size committed affordable, or CAF units, including 612 two-bedroom units and 47 three-bedroom units. The property will be affordable for 99 years and will add to the CAF inventory within transit corridors, specifically the Columbia Pike corridor. In addition, the project will support Housing Arlington initiatives. The County Board initiated Housing Arlington in 2019 as a way to bring together many of the county's existing efforts and to determine new strategies for ensuring that the county's supply goal of the Affordable Housing Master Plan is met. The strategies we'll explore to help with the preservation of the Barcroft community support the following Housing Arlington initiatives. Under land use tools, we can explore tool opportunities within the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan. For financial tools, we propose using a county line of credit, which I'll explain more shortly, to expand available county resources. The project would also leverage new private sources to enable affordable housing preservation. And for county employee housing, the Barcroft community is home to county staff, including police officers. Preservation of this neighborhood will provide continually stable housing for segments of the county's workforce. So let's talk a little bit more about the affordability and resident protections provided within this project. In the short term, it's important to note that no current residents will be displaced as a result of this acquisition. The rents for these residents shall remain at current rent levels for the first year. And thereafter, rents will increase no more than 3% a year, up to the 60% of area median income rent level. In terms of long-term protections, the acquisition will include restrictive covenants for 99 years of affordability at the 60% of area median income rent level. This is the longest affordability period in the county's affordable housing portfolio to date. Given the significance of this sale, I'd also like to speak to how the county, seller, and purchaser are communicating with current residents. Barcroft residents were notified of the acquisition with hand-delivered letters on Friday, December 10th. These notices were translated into some of the primary languages spoken at the property, including Spanish, Amharic, Arabic, and Mongolian. Staff also has communicated with Bugata and resident advocacy organizations so we can stay aware of any resident questions and concerns. Once the acquisition is complete, the purchaser will continue to provide outreach and information to residents as renovation plans progress. I've shared some of the envisioned policy goals for the project, and should this acquisition move forward, significant work will begin following the sale. Pending further property condition report information, we anticipate the units at Barcroft Apartments may benefit from renovation or redevelopment, and as a result, a master financing and development plan will be created in 2022 to consider rehab and redevelopment options for the site. Given the extensive neighborhood planning that has already occurred along Columbia Pike, the Master Financing and Development Plan will focus on financing and development options specific to the Barcroft site, primarily within the existing context of the Neighborhoods Area Plan and conservation areas. The Master Financing and Development Plan will consider preservation and rehab of those units within the conservation areas, which is about 1,100 units, as well as redevelopment of a portion of units that could help maximize available financing sources and enable a mixed-income community. It is anticipated the majority of the affordable units rehabbed or redeveloped will use low-income housing tax credits, and this plan will outline financing details of how the $150 million county acquisition loan may be restructured as various rehab and redevelopment projects come online. The Master Financing and Development Plan will be finalized, as I said, in 2022 to maximize community benefits while also ensuring long-term renovations begin as quickly as possible. Depending on the opportunities identified, there could be ways to restructure the deal to bring about additional resources and possibly to reduce county investment. Further, it's anticipated that no additional county financing will be necessary as the affordable units are renovated or redeveloped. To support this acquisition, the purchaser is requesting a $150 million subordinate loan from the county. This equates to about $112,000 per unit, which is less than the 12-year average county loan amount of $125,000 per unit for typical third-party market acquisition rehab projects. The loan term would be for 35 years and carry a 1% interest rate for the first 5 years. This will increase to 2.5% for the balance of the loan term. It's important to note the county's acquisition loan will be restructured as future tax credit projects come online. It's anticipated that the rehab and redevelopment of the property will be phased and completed in the next 10 years. The initial acquisition financing will include equity from the borrower and associated investors, an Amazon loan, and the county acquisition fund loan. The borrower is anticipated to close on this financing by the end of December 2021, and post-acquisition, the borrower, also known as the purchaser, will secure a senior loan to repay a portion of the equity used to support the acquisition. The total acquisition budget also includes over $10 million in funds for repairs that may be needed prior to any future rehab or redevelopment projects. Although interim repairs will be made, the full scope of renovation and redevelopment work will be addressed in future tax credit financing deals. To enable a county loan of this size within the acquisition timeframe, county staff proposes using a line of credit with PNC Bank that is allowing $150 million of county funding to be available at closing. This line of credit will be outstanding for a maximum of 5 years, with the intention of refinancing into permanent debt at or before expiration once a permanent development plan and long-term financing strategy are finalized. The line of credit will be subject to appropriation debt of the county and will have a variable interest rate. In fiscal year 22, just to give you a sense of the debt service on this debt, the first 6 months of debt service for interest only will have a total expenditure of $850,000. In fiscal year 23, debt service on this line of credit is projected to range from $1.6 million to $2 million, depending on interest rates. And debt service for the balance of the line of credit will be conservatively budgeted based on prevailing interest rates. Interest-only payments on the county's line of credit debt will be partially offset by the $1.5 million in annual interest due on the county acquisition fund loan, and any difference will be funded from the Affordable Housing Investment Fund, or AHIF. Although the county loan amount is not anticipated to exceed $150 million, until the permanent financing plan is developed and implemented, the county will not know the full longer-term financial and capital impacts. As shared a moment ago, the short-term county line of credit will be refinanced before the end of its 5-year term. Based on very preliminary analysis, which assumes a reduction in the county's loan as tax credit or other financing sources are identified and executed, the long-term debt service impact could range from $5 to $7 million annually, depending on market conditions, the amortization structure, and terms of the permanent financing strategy. This range could be materially higher if the permanent financing strategy that we're envisioning is unable to be executed. But staff believe that through the 2022 Master Financing and Development Plan process, viable options can be developed to reduce the debt service impact. Given the amount of debt the county is incurring to fund this loan, paying for this annual debt service will require trade-offs for other budget, capital, and affordable housing priorities during and beyond the acquisition financing stage. So with these fiscal impacts in mind, and even with the planning and housing goals achieved, some may ask, why is the county considering such an expensive project? And the answer is the residents and the county's equity goals. Housing is central to achieving equity in Arlington. Specifically, in the county's equity dashboard, we see the disparities in housing affordability and the impacts on racial groups in our community. This project is an opportunity to close gaps and raise predictors of success, which helps to improve outcomes for everyone. This level of investment in housing and the opportunity to bring about equity in this community demonstrates how providing housing choice and opportunity are key priorities for the county. In other words, how we implement racial equity is evidenced by projects such as this one. With this in mind, staff evaluated how this acquisition meets racial equity goals as part of the County Board Equity Resolution, which was adopted in September 2019. The resolution includes, in part, direction to engage and collaborate with partners to enhance county efforts and commitment to fostering equity, and to apply a racial equity lens for every project we consider. And for that, we specifically ask the questions of who benefits, who's burdened, who's missing, how do we know, and what do we do? For context, while we don't yet have specific demographic data for Barcroft residents, the 2018 American Community Survey data for households earning up to 60% of the area median income indicate that 25% are Latino, 20% are Black, and 15% are Asian. We also know that Barcroft residents speak many languages, including those I mentioned earlier, Spanish, Amharic, Arabic, and Mongolian, amongst other languages. With this context in mind, we start by asking who benefits. This acquisition project would benefit the current families that are living at the property because it would enable them to continue to live in their homes at an affordable rent. And with the intention for future renovation or redevelopment of the Barcroft units, this would ensure quality homes are being secured into the future. On the other hand, if this project does not move forward and families face displacement, the low and moderate income families at Barcroft Apartments are the population that would be burdened. Currently, only 11.7% of Arlington's rental housing stock is affordable to households earning less than 60% of the area median income. Limited housing choices at this affordability level means that losing existing housing stock would cause uncertainty for residents as to whether they could even stay in Arlington. As for who's missing, we will continue to evaluate this as the renovation and redevelopment plans are finalized in order to ensure we're capturing those populations that may typically be overlooked in the process. And how do we know these things? We know as a result of our data collection efforts through the Affordable Housing Master Plan annual reviews and our ongoing work as part of Housing Arlington. Should this acquisition move forward, the purchaser will also engage with residents to learn more about the households living at the property now. And lastly, for the question, what do we do? We are bringing forward this project as a first step towards providing committed, affordable housing for Barcroft residents and to close those housing opportunity gaps. Should this project move forward, staff will continue throughout this process to use and apply the racial equity lens and specifically ask ourselves these questions. In summary, ensuring stable and affordable housing for Arlington's residents is of utmost priority to the county. This acquisition will help preserve the affordability of the largest affordable complex in Arlington, and over time will enable an opportunity to renovate or redevelop these units to ensure stable and quality homes in the long term. If the following recommendations are approved by the County Board, we will look forward to closing on financing anticipated before the end of the year. And then we'll get to work on the plans to create a vibrant, sustainable, and affordable mixed-income community. We have 2 board reports being considered by the County Board this evening. In the first one, item 32A, the county manager recommends the following. Number 1, allocate $150 million and County Acquisition Fund loan funds to support the acquisition of Barcroft Apartments. Number 2, approve the associated loan documents. Number 3, authorize and direct the trustees for the county board to execute all related documents. And number 4, authorize and direct the county manager, with the concurrence of the county attorney, to act as the county board's representative in approving revisions to the loan documents that remove ambiguity or improve the county board's financial security or position. In the second, item 32B, the county manager recommends the following. Number 1, approve the resolution authorizing the county to issue revenue notes to finance the acquisition of certain land, equipment, and other capital projects on a revolving credit basis. Number 2, appropriate $150 million of loan proceeds to a general fund non-departmental account to finance the Barcroft acquisition loan. And number 3, appropriate $0.85 million from unallocated AHEV balances for 6 months of debt service in fiscal year 2022. Thank you, and that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Venezia. We will now turn to the applicant for their presentation, Mr. Lynch.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me take my mask off. It was hard to get my game face on. It is wonderful to be here tonight. I'll wait for our presentation to get on the screen, and then I'll get started. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So first of all, my name is Jair Lynch, President and CEO of Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners. We are the applicant for this project. We are very excited to be here tonight, and we think we are at the precipice of really creating something extraordinary at the Barcroft Apartments. We will take you through a brief presentation, and then I'll be available for questions. We'll start with who we are, observations and opportunities, and then our commitment that is consistent with the county's commitment to affordable housing at this location. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We've been in business for 23 years, and essentially we have built the company for this opportunity. Mixed use, intergenerational, preservation, renovation, placemaking, all of the above. And we have prepared ourselves by executing many projects that are in the same vein. While we are based in DC, we have a regional portfolio and a regional workforce. Our general counsel lives in Arlington. The asset manager for this project lives in Alexandria. We are as diverse as the population at the property. We employ a place-based approach with multiple strategies working in tandem, which means when we plant, we stay for decades. Next slide, please. Our mission is to create extraordinary places, whether public-facing assets like the Central Library in Washington, D.C., named after Martin Luther King, or neighborhood-serving retail, or homes that we care about the quality. We think about the doorknob, the living room, the outdoor space, the entire neighborhood. And most importantly, we think about the people, as that's the center of our mission. We think about the diversity of the supply chain and implementing inclusive hiring practices whenever possible. We work in all jurisdictions. We currently own assets in Woodridge, Herndon, and soon in Alexandria. Next slide, please. Our core principles related to housing will be in full effect at Barcroft. We orient our interactions with residents, not tenants, to be positive. We make sure that a home is the launching pad for economic mobility. Much of what I've heard from the previous presentation is aligned with that. Next slide, please. You may have seen in the paper that we have surpassed our goal that we set forth in 2019 to address attainable housing issues in the region with the purchase of Plaza Towers in Hyattsville. We have a deep knowledge of housing across the income spectrum, and we're committed to preserving the 1,300 units of housing at Barcroft, not just for today, but for the 99 years going forward. Next slide, please. This Sunday, while we were working on this project, as mentioned, most of us have been working every single day for the last few months. I was reminded of my first walk at the Barcroft Apartments. I was walking with an architect that we often utilize, who is from Mumbai, and he and I were walking through the neighborhood, and I was, as a son of an immigrant from Colombia, heard a lot of Spanish and said hello to a lot of people. And he, as an immigrant from Mumbai, heard Hindi, Bengali, and Drugati, if I said it properly. We were immediately struck by the multicultural nature of the community, and we think that that is the first thing we'll try to celebrate. We also were struck by the fact that there was a lack of amenities and common space. No pool, no tot lots, nothing for children, insufficient bike storage, and we recognized that the property had been built in phases over many, many years. But we want to create places in which people can gather. We want to bring amenities in which people could enjoy. We also want to create a sense of pride in the community. For that, we'll spill out to the schools and the businesses on Columbia Pike. Next slide, please. To get to a positive place, we need to provide housing stability for the current residents. We need to be a beacon for nonprofits and service providers who can help the current residents. We also need to preserve and restore and elevate the longstanding neighborhood with contemporary spaces and amenity that honor the past and build for the future. But the most important thing, there'll be no displacement. Next slide, please. So the immediate opportunities. As I mentioned, we're going to celebrate the multicultural community that exists at Barcroft. We're going to introduce new property management. We're going to introduce new resident services. Sample programs include modules such as health and wellness, financial literacy, child and family education, and language programs. We're going to ensure that all the residents are approached in the languages that they know, and we'll make sure the residents are part of the planning that will happen over the next year, as mentioned earlier, as we develop a master financing and development plan. But most importantly, as mentioned, we have several $1 million to address immediate needs before the comprehensive plan moves forward. Next slide, please. The long-term opportunities, as we will work on this for at least a decade, we will make sure that there will be improvements, but all the residents will remain. There'll be new amenities, and we'll create landing zones for nonprofits and other organizations to engage with the residents. We think this is vital. But we have these preliminary ideas, but we will also make sure that we're listening to the community at the Barcroft apartment complex, as well as the surrounding community, to ensure that we are creating the proper tapestry that is appropriate for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Resident services and property management are going to be a key. We'll have 2 full-time resident service coordinators to make sure that we have real connectivity on a daily basis with the residents. They will report directly to our asset managers, and we'll make sure that the resident service program is up and running as quickly as possible. We'll then listen to the community and make sure that we have tailored programs that are what people want, not just what we think they want. We'll create linkages to nonprofits and other government entities to make sure the residents have the services that they're looking for. And then we'll also include inclusive hiring practices to make sure vendors and contractors know that there may be talent in the community and on the property. By reaching out to those community members, there's a sense of pride that will happen if people are able to be involved with many of the aspects of the redevelopment or the operations of the community. Next slide, please. The most important thing, if there's anything to remember, is our commitment to both the Barcroft residents and the Arlington community. We have a proven track record of helping neighborhoods in multiple engagements, investments. For example, in Tacoma, DC, we started by building an aquatic center. Soon after, we purchased a mixed-use, mixed-income property that is the center of Tacoma neighborhood, with neighborhood serving retail, including a Busboys and Poets. But because we listened to the community, we also knew that there was a need for affordable housing that serves seniors, and we're now under construction of that. That is an example of how we work in the same neighborhood over and over again. The current residents are our priority. They will not be displaced, and they'll be part of the planning process going forward. We understand this is a big commitment for the county, and we're ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with you for the next decade to preserve this important community while building for the future. Thank you for my resilient team. I cannot end without saying a big shout out to all of them who worked tirelessly over the last 60 days, but we still have energy. We have energy to close, and we have energy to see this project forward, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I'll note that I believe if we have questions, Ms. Buell's here with Amazon, but we will note also that we have our advisory group chairs. I believe Eric Berkey, I think I saw, and I think Mr. Tim are available. Eric Berkey is our Housing Commission chair, and David Tim is our Tenant Landlord chair. Mr. Kushner, are there any public speakers on this item?
There are. If you just give me just a moment.
Sure. While you're getting set, is there a representative from the Planning Commission on the line in case we have questions? And that may require unmuting and multitasking, but I see Mr. Weir.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I'm here. The Planning Commission hasn't acted on this or been briefed, but of course I am happy to answer any questions to the extent that I'm able to.
Thanks very much, Mr. Weir. Appreciate it. And now to speakers, Mr. Kushner.
Of course, our first speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Daniel Weir.
Ms. Clement.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Ms. Clement.
Okay. I'm Audrey Clement. I'm from Westover. Welcome, members of the board and the county manager. The Barcroft deal is amazing for its lack of transparency. The county has announced that it's taking out a $150 million loan to facilitate until tonight an unnamed buyer's purchase of 1,300 market rate units on South George Mason Drive. The agenda item for the project indicates that Amazon is in on the deal, but provides no information about how much financing either Amazon or the project's equity investors will supply. There is no explanation for why the developer needs so much moolah from the county to seal this deal. It is known that Amazon owner Jeff Bezos is worth $198 billion. That's billion, not million. He's not short on cash. You don't need to, evidently, you don't need to know the assessed value of the property or even the purchase price, nor do residents need to know the cost of improvements to the property. All you need to know, according to a flyer the county has distributed, is that 1,300 market rate units will be kept affordable for 99 years and no one will be evicted. Since the project comports with the county's housing goals, there is no need to perform a fiscal impact analysis, justifying the expense to county taxpayers. If county leaders don't need any additional information to make an informed decision, you and I certainly do not. I'm all for affordable, privately owned market rate housing. In fact, I live in one of the few affordable garden apartments remaining in Westover, and I can attest to both its affordability and convenience. But the loan we're talking about is more than 10% of the county's annual operating budget. Surely the taxpayers who are financing this 35-year loan are entitled to know that the investment is both prudent and necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Daniel Weir, followed by Marjorie Green.
Mr. Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the County Board. So for the record, Daniel Weir, I want to disclaim that I wear a couple of hats that are adjacent to this project. I'm the incoming chair of the Planning Commissioner and the vice president of the Barcroft School and Civic League. And the only reason I'm mentioning that is so that the record can reflect that I am speaking on behalf of neither of those entities right now. So that said, in my individual capacity, I think that this is quite possibly one of the deals of the century for Arlington. It is a fantastic opportunity to take a complete and holistic and comprehensive look at one of the areas upon which the entirety of the neighborhood form-based code and commercial form-based code turns in its success or failure. I can't say enough good things about what we've learned about this project so far. We've got a lot of work to do. Let's get the deal closed and let's get to work. That's it. That's the comment. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Marjorie Green, followed by Jane Green.
Ms. Green.
I'm Marjorie Green, one of the...
Hang on just a second. Can you turn on the mic?
Oh, sorry.
You could raise a little bit on the right. There's a button. Perfect.
I never thought I was so short. Thank you. I'm Marjorie Green, one of the Arlington leaders and Voice Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement. This project is still new to us. We're still digesting it, but I think it's safe to say that we see that this initiative represents a significant attempt on the part of the county to address the housing crisis, housing affordability crisis in Arlington, and it most definitely is a crisis, particularly for low-income people and people of color. Since Voice's founding in 2008, we have heard from Arlington residents, a cross-section in fact, that housing affordability is one of the most significant challenges they face. We hear this every day in conversations and listening sessions. We welcome the recognition implicit in this move that the county sees housing affordability as indeed a crisis. And we welcome the commitment reflected here to preserving the diversity of our county, the diversity that we all prize. For years, Voices urged the county to be proactive on housing affordability, to move swiftly when necessary, to be innovative. The county has done all of that here. Of note, the project will provide a significant number of badly needed family-sized units. And we have learned, particularly from our experience at the Serrano, how very much in need of those units we are. Speaking of the Serrano and turning to the tenant protections here, we're glad to see those. We have learned that they are absolutely critical, and we urge the county to monitor developments as this process unfolds and ensure that those tenant protections indeed are implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Jane Green, followed by David McTaggart.
No relation. Hello, my name is Jane Green. I am here to applaud the county board and all of the county staff members and the private sector staff members who have been involved in this incredible project coming together. Well, not a project, but proposal coming together so quickly. I can't even imagine what was going on behind the scenes as some of us in the housing advocacy community had heard that this sale was pending and were really concerned about what the future would hold for the property and most importantly for the residents there. So to see this as the hopeful first step in a forward-moving process are so pleased. I think the highlight of this is the decision to prioritize our neighbors who are living at Barcroft currently and those who are, because they are part of what makes Arlington a diverse and vibrant community. So emphasizing that there will be no displacement, that rent will be stabilized for the first year and then grow 3% annually. God, if only my rent was only 3%, I would be very happy. So I think the 60% AMI, up to 60% AMI, is really promising, and look forward to ways that we can expand to have a portion of that be for even lower. And I just look forward to the public engagement process around the master financing and development plan, which will be really exciting. It seems like from the presentation here, we have an excellent partner in this that has a great reputation. And so there's a great opportunity to maximize what this property can be for both the current residents, the future residents, and all of Arlington. I appreciated that the housing director said that there will be trade-offs. Money doesn't grow on trees, and we have to be honest about that, but I can't imagine there would be anything that would be worth this trade-off. So thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is David McTaggart, followed by Nicole Merline.
Good evening. My name is David McTaggart, and I am representing Voice, Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement, but also I speak as a resident of South Arlington. I live in the neighboring Barcroft community. I've lived there with my wife since 1997. Indeed, when we were first arrived in Arlington County and were looking for a place to live, the diversity, the racial, ethnic diversity of South Arlington was particularly meaningful to us. And for the 24 intervening years, we've been certainly blessed to have this, to be living in part of that community ourselves. Specifically, the Barcroft community, the subject of this project, I applaud. It's wonderful. And speaking from my experience of these Barcroft residents as my neighbors, great neighbors, good people, and I just applaud that they will have the opportunity to continue living in my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McTaggart. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Nicole Merline, followed by Saul Reyes.
Ms. Marlene, are you there virtually? Ms. Marlene?
You may need to dial *6 if you're joining by phone.
Ms. Marlene? We can go on to the next speaker, and Ms. Marlene will let you work with Mr. Kushner, and we'll see if we can work that out. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Saul Reyes, followed by James Hers.
Mr. Reyes.
Good evening, everyone. County Board Chair DeFerranti, County Board members, and County Manager. I have to look for you. In the midst of everything that the community has gone through and people here in Arlington, there's good news specifically for the Barcroft residents. Displacement at this time would have been detrimental, catastrophic. I applaud the county for the work to preserve this community and the property. Thank God this did not result in another Ardna Valley, for those who are familiar with that, where rush decisions were made. And I just want to say that we as Bugata do not approve of, the behind-the-scenes types of deals. I don't think that the circumstances will repeat themselves, and this will be, we wouldn't want it to be set a precedent. This instance resulting in the preservation of something similar to Buckingham Gardens, right? However, in that case, the deal was open with an RFP and resident participation on the front end and through the planning process, not at the back end. And I can't stress enough the importance of having the residents take part of the decision making. So for this project, our Barcroft, to be successful, the new owner needs to ramp up communication with the community, including the community in the decision making. We cannot hope and wait, so we urge the county to be proactive. It is key and essential and very important, and there needs to be a total and complete survey done of existing tenants as of right now, December 2021, to include rent, family size, ethnic, racial background, income, etc., all the needs in the community. Many residents can afford to pay the higher rents and have chosen to live at Barcroft, but also there may be overcrowding. And so there needs to be an ironclad agreement that nobody will be evicted because of overcrowding. Eventually, relocation plan will be needed, and we need to think about who will do that. Who will manage the property as well? Will they accept new tenants when there's vacancies, and what guarantees there'll be, and what criteria will be for hiring a management company? The new owner seems to be very neighbor-friendly, but want to ensure and urge the county to ensure that there's quality renovations and quality management that is respectful of residents, as we've experienced over the last couple of years. So this is very important that there is good customer service, good service to residents as well. So with that, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. I see Ms. Marlene has joined us. Ms. Marlene.
Hi, good evening. Pardon. Apologies for my tardiness. The CivFed meeting is now at the same time as your meeting. So I came to just briefly add my support to the decision to provide this loan on the property. I think the logistics of how this is executed will be important and look forward to engaging with you all on that. But for the time being, from what I understand, the immediacy of executing this deal is paramount. And I want you all to know that people from all ranges of the county, from fiscal conservatives to, people that are extremely into the affordable housing advocacy world that I like to affiliate myself with, have spoken to me privately in support of this deal. This is the largest affordable housing complex in the county, and without your support, I am confident that this wouldn't continue. And I think that the logistics on this 99-year guarantee for affordability will be interesting to play out. But I hope that there are some sort of, I don't want to call them clawbacks, but there is a plan to ensure that that longevity is held, because that can be touchy with, a certain type of buyer. So all of that to say, thank you for figuring this out. I know a lot of people were very nervous about it, and I just wanted to thank you for your leadership on this, because as a by right development, this was not a guaranteed outcome. And so for all the staff that helped make this happen and for all of your leadership on the board, I just wanted to thank you. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Marlene. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is James Uraz, followed by Martha Bosman.
Mr. Uraz, are you there virtually? Mr. Uraz.
That's *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Mr. Uraz.
This is a major upsizing of the affordable housing deals the county board has approved over the past several years as part of the county board's decades-long addiction to new urbanism, also known as suburban renewal, also known as infill elitist growth for the sake of growth gentrification. Renovated Barcroft apartments would largely be tech force housing for Amazon employees. Low-wage employees who work on the Pike could not afford to live in renovated Barcroft. 60% of AMI in 2021 amounts to $37 per hour. The real estate trust that would own Barcroft Apartments creates vibrant Clarendon-style upscale redevelopment in D.C. and elsewhere per its own website. And that's ubiquitous on its website. That would be a Barcroft Apartments future, similar to your Clarendonization plan for Langston Boulevard. The workforce has already been gentrified out of the Pike corridor via the form-based code, and so have essential amenities which are being replaced by boutique retail and expensive personal services. Significantly more vehicles would use the Pike, so their owners could commute to actually affordable housing from places of employment far from the Pike. Even more Pike residents would drive to the Route 7 corridor in Fairfax County for essential products and services. Democracy in Arlington has deteriorated to the point where county board refuses to share basic information about this deal with taxpayers and citizens groups, e.g. the CivFed's Revenue and Expenditures Committee. This is what we get from 40 years of one-party government, where plutocrat elitists who govern us, Mr. De Ferrante, and their media facilitators and their corporate and nonprofit cronies live in upscale suburban enclaves and hugely profit from making every older middle-class neighborhood in Arlington a redevelopment opportunity. New urbanism is nothing but urban renewal, gentrification of urban neighborhoods during the 1960s, exported to older neighborhoods between 1990 and today. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Uraz. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Martha Bosman, followed by Julia Spain.
Ms. Bosman.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Martha Bosman, and I am here tonight as the Interim Executive Director for the Alliance for Housing Solutions to say thank you for your vision, congratulations on all the work so far and the work to come. And since AHS educates and advocates for affordable housing, we're really excited to see this happening. Thank you so much for making it happen. We've heard about all the protections that are going to be taken and put in place for residents, and we appreciate that very much. And it's just a thrilling opportunity. So thank you for what you're doing, and we look forward to being a part in whatever way in the engagement of all the various communities and stakeholders as the long range is planned here and as the short range happens. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Bosman. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Julia Spain, followed by John Snyder.
Mr. Spain.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, and to County Manager. I had to change up my notes because I heard a lot of great things here tonight about the future of Barcroft. And, you know, the NAACP only plays a small role in some of the things we do here in the community, but housing, as you're innately aware of, is one of them. And as we look and study housing conditions and a host of other things, I'm happy to hear that displacement will not occur to some of our most vulnerable residents in our community. But I am a bit concerned as a leader that the public policy decision-making process was kind of made public 24 48 hours prior to tonight. And that gives a lot of leaders perhaps some pause, but I also understand the sensitivity surrounding the decision-making process. There's two things, and I had to shorten up this speech a little bit, my comments, because I did hear some good things today. And I spoke with Ann earlier, so thank you, Ann, you're a great partner. There's a few things the NAACP wants to know, would like to know. Would you, the county, commit that the Arlington relocation guidelines and access to the tenant assistance fund be used to assist tenants during any future redevelopment? And the next thing we need to know, and numbers are important, data is important. You know, we have about 1,300 units over there right now, right? But we also know of those 1,300 units, you're talking about perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 actual people, right? Some are kind of doubled up in some of these houses. So we would like to know the hard number, the real number of who these individuals are in and around, in Barcroft particularly. Because that's important for us to monitor. And I'll just say this, you know, I've been in Arlington since 2009, and the numbers don't lie, y'all. You know, Arlington, the demographics at least, we've experienced tremendous demographic transformation over the years. This right here is going to be a challenge. The NAACP will be here as a partner to help you along the way. But I just hope and pray, you know, at the end of the day, we're able to retain these current residents in these projects because, you know, people that come here to Arlington want to come here and call it home. And we need to do everything in our power to help aid and assist them along the way. So with that, again, my remarks are quite short tonight. Perhaps I should have called in on Teams, but Appreciate everything you're doing here. I know it's difficult. Some of us knew about this decision, what was going on a couple weeks ago, but sometimes you have to let the process run its course. And we look forward, again, to the engagement. And if you need the NAACP for anything, we're here to support you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spain. Next speaker.
Our next and final speaker is John Snyder.
Mr. Snyder.
Good evening. My name is John
You may
Snyder.
want to just, there's a button on the right. If you could lift up the podium just a little bit, that'll help us. And I think your mic is off. There you go.
We're on? Great.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is John Snyder. I am chairman of the board of the Columbia Pike Partnership, the organization formerly known as the Columbia Pike Revitalization Organization, or CPRO. I am very happy to be here tonight under these circumstances because we've been looking forward to this day, not quite like this day, but with dread for literally 20 years. Because in all the different development scenarios and all the planning that's been done, one of the primary focuses was avoid displacement. And to date, the Pike community and the county have been very successful in that regard. Instead of displacing with new development, we've actually added over 500 new affordable units in new projects, which is pretty remarkable. There's also about 200 that are being preserved before this deal came along. But in all of these, we're wondering what's going to happen when Barcroft decides to redevelop. What are we going to do? We heard about Arna Valley earlier tonight. We don't want to repeat that experience. This development is twice as big as Arna Valley, so it's twice as important. One of the core values of our organization and everybody on the Pike has been we want to keep our neighbors in the neighborhood. It's really simple, but that's what a neighborhood is about, the neighbors, and we want people to stay. One of our favorite books is Living Diversity, which is the photo collection of the Pike documentary project. And it's really important because the idea is we want that book to be about what the Pike is like, not what it used to be like, right? And now with this action, that's going to be happening. There's still going to be change, but the biggest part of this change is not going to happen, and our residents are going to remain in the same place. Now, a lot of this is through the form-based code. The original one didn't cover residential properties, so no one would be displaced. The neighborhoods plan was built exactly for this issue. And the neighborhoods plan, as I'm sure the board is aware, allows for redevelopment that will help make this transaction, the whole transaction, economically feasible. And that's one of the legacies of the planning process that we've been through. Going forward, tonight is really, we celebrate the opportunity to get to start. With the county helping with this acquisition, we get to start the real planning process on exactly where the building is going to be. What are they going to look like? How's the conservation area going to work? And as part of that, and a first step that I probably should have taken earlier, Mr. Lynch, welcome to the neighborhood. We're really glad you're here. And we're really glad for everything that the county has done, that the county staff has done, that Amazon is doing by contributing to this, and that everyone is doing to make this work going forward. It has a tremendous opportunity for success, and I want to let you know that the Columbia Pike Partnership is going to be here to help in any way we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. With that, the discussion is now with the board. Colleagues, number of areas, I think we'll do at least one, perhaps two rounds of questions on this. First, where I'd like to see if we can, our speakers have raised a number of issues. There's the financing component. I'll just lay out two or three, and then you can choose, but I'll start with three areas that I'd just like to highlight. There's the financing component. There's the development plan, year 1 and years 2 2 through 10, perhaps longer. And then there's, for me, I'll start with the housing protection provisions. And just because a couple of speakers mentioned that. So I think that this question is probably for Ms. Venezia and Mr. Schwartz, but also there'll be a question, I think, probably for Ms. Kaur as well, and perhaps Mr. Lynch too. But I'll start with Ms. Venezia and Mr. Schwartz. It concerns the protections that we've thought about and conceptualized on making sure that we're at the start. We have, as I understand it, we have some knowledge of these units, but there's much more that needs to be done to figure out the condition of the 1,334 units. So I believe it's page 27. There's a couple of protections that are put into, this is of the County Acquisition Fund loan agreement. Right in that area, there's some protections with respect to on-site inspections. And I wondered if you could speak, probably for you to start, Ms. Venezia, to the protections to make sure that the conditions we've put into these documents, protections for the conditions of the units. And there may be other provisions, but probably at the conceptual level first, can you speak a little bit to what we've done to, as we learn more about the units, to make sure that the county's investment is protected so that we're taking care of our residents as the interiors of the units before the development occurs?
Sure, yes, I'm happy to speak to that. So we are committed, not only at Barcroft, but really all of our projects, to making sure that residents are afforded quality and dignified housing. And so what will happen following closing, when we have a better idea of what the unit conditions are, we will be working very closely with the new owner to see if there are any immediate needs that need to be addressed. As I mentioned during the presentation, there are funds that will be set aside in order to help with immediate needs and also just in general capital expenditures that are needed in advance of these longer-term tax credit deals that may be coming online again over the next 5 to 10 years or so. And so what we'll be doing is, and I think Mr. Spain referenced this as well, we will be providing oversight during that time. So we'll be receiving copies of the reports that specify what the unit conditions are. We do have a compliance team that will be following up to ensure if there are immediate repairs, that those are done to the standards that we would expect. And again, really working again very closely alongside the owner and the new property manager, just to make sure that residents are receiving the services that we would expect and also that they're living in the unit conditions that we would expect.
Great, thank you. And maybe I'll ask, and I'm Ms. Crystal, just one or two more follow-ups, and then to you on this, and colleagues, if you want to jump in. I guess it would be to our county attorney first, or Mr. Schwartz. It's sort of, have I tracked to the right provision in page 27? Is that on-site inspections? The way I read it, that's perhaps one of the stronger protections that we have with respect to tenant conditions. I could be incorrect, but I wondered if you could speak at all to this, probably Ms. Kaur and maybe Mr. Schwartz in addition, if there's, and that may be a level of detail that you need a few minutes, but go ahead, Ms. Kaur.
There are several provisions that talk about the on-site condition. Inspections is one of them, but we're also holding the new owner to certain standards. That's in 505, relating to property condition in the loan document. It requires normal and routine maintenance. It requires adherence to Chapter 29 of the Housing Standards Ordinance. It requires adherence to the maintenance code and also to the housing quality standards of Section 8. And so I don't know how I would characterize it as far as which one is stronger, but I will say that there are numerous provisions in here that talk about the condition of the property in our attempt to make sure, as Ms. Venezia said, the residents are taken care of in that way.
Thank you for fielding my general question and referring to it broadly. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Schwartz?
And perhaps Ms. Venezia wants to go into further detail, but you did make reference, there was reference in the documents to needing approval for a tenant relocation plan that comes through, that would come through me, and also we're working with, and Ms. Venezia could talk a little bit, or maybe Mr. Lynch, about the information right now in the process of getting a census done as to actually who is there and what the units are like, but that might be better coming from Mr. Lynch.
Start with Mr. Lynch and then Ms. Venezia if you have to add. Mr. Lynch.
I think this is a great question, and we're very pleased with the work that we've done with the county in terms of negotiating not only the terms, but some of these protections. These protections are supported by, like we've indicated, over $10 million for immediate repairs, and that is part of the business deal. There's also vacancy at the property, like there is in any, and we will utilize that vacancy to make sure if there's any units that are substandard, that we'll immediately be able to move a family to another unit on property or on site. So we will utilize vacancy as a means to be able to take care of any immediate issues, as well as use vacancy through the comprehensive renovations when they happen in the phases coming in the coming years.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Anything to add, Ms. Venezia, or does that cover it?
The only other thing that I'll add is that we have had conversations already with Mr. Lynch and his team about these future phase projects that we're referencing, that they would be abiding by the county's approved tenant relocation guidelines. And the process that goes along with that. And so we will be, working closely with them to ensure that they are following those guidelines that you all have approved. And again, going through the process that we would expect, which does include review by our Tenant Landlord Commission and ultimately sign off by Mr. Schwartz and me as well. So just wanted to let folks know that too.
Thanks to each of you. Start with Ms. Crystal, and will colleagues certainly join in.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that line of inquiry could tease out a couple of what I think are really important conditions, right? The $10 million included as part of the acquisition, as well as the currently vacant units. I think for those of us who are very concerned about the state of these, I had been in the habit of calling them post-war apartments. It sounds like some of them were constructed during war even. So perhaps even a couple years older than we had thought. So recognizing that there are some kind of infrastructure available to help support tenants as maybe necessary repairs are done on their units, I think is really reassuring. One of the other lenses through which I'm looking at this potential, the magnitude of the need that may arise once, God willing, the sale of the property and transfer to the new owner is complete. Thinking about, I think it was teed up in a couple of our speakers, Mr. Reyes, for example, talked about the overcrowding of the units, which we're aware of. And I wondered, Ms. Venezia, it might make sense to start with you. I also think we maybe had some representatives of DHS on the line with us as well. I know you all have worked very closely together in context of the Serrano and really just the pandemic in general to think about the kind of interplay of eviction prevention and human services needs, as well as housing quality. Is there anything else that you would add to round out that picture? To give some confidence that for the tenants who may take some reassurance of knowing that their rent will not go up, but maybe are concerned about a crowding situation or whether they'll be taken care of when the sort of more attention is brought to the current condition of the units.
Sure, yes, I'm happy to kick this off, and then I'm going to phone a friend and have our DHS colleague round out anything that I share here. So I think the first thing that is so important is we have to get a better idea of who is actually living at the property. We have a sense of some situations that may be going on, but we don't really know for sure. And so I think first and foremost, we really do need to get more information about the residents who are living at the property now. And we'll be working very closely, of course, with the new owner. We also have a number of wonderful resident advocates that work very closely with a lot of the residents in that community already. So we will be, just trying to get a better idea of what's going on first and foremost. And then I think, as Mr. Lynch referenced, there are vacant units available at the property. I think if there are opportunities to provide existing households more space, if they need additional units to accommodate their households while still living on property, there may be opportunities to do that. And this is the moment when I'm going to phone a friend and have Ms. Hammond-Perez, who's online with us tonight, say a little more about some of the services that we could provide to residents once we know more about their needs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Yes, so we know currently that there are 33 housing grant clients at Barcroft. We don't have any PSH or housing choice voucher clients there. But that being said, we are providing millions of dollars of assistance to residents in need who are not able to pay their rent. And so we are committed to continuing to do so for any and all residents who need assistance, and we will continue to do so. They can call 703-228-1300, and we will help them pay their rents. And if they're having any issues with doing so, then we will work with them on those wraparound supports. We also have the Arlington Employment Center that will work with individuals who are looking to find a job. And as we've been talking about overcrowded apartments, we'll work with individuals there as well on any and all wraparound supports.
Thank you both. I really appreciate that insight and perspective.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal, over to Ms. Garvey.
All right, thank you. I think I'll just pursue this a little bit. I think a lot of people listening are wondering, they don't know who's in there, why don't they? And I think we're probably going to find some difficult conditions in some of these apartments, and I think people are going to say, how did Arlington County let that happen? So I think there's some very good legal reasons why that might be the case, and I just wonder if I don't know if it's Ms. Venezia or Ms. Kaur might talk a little bit about what restrictions we have on going into Barcroft, or we have had going into Barcroft apartments, and why it is we don't have such a good idea of what's there exactly. Or maybe it's Mr. Lynch. I don't know. I know it's going to change. That's my understanding. But
Well, there's a couple things to consider. When we buy assets across the region, you'll have varying levels of information that may come from private owners who don't have any public dollars or don't have any existing government programs that are embedded in the property. If this was an existing LIHTC property, the files would be very deep for each resident because they'd have not only income qualification, but also annual certifications. This property does not have that because it has none of these government programs. And so what we need to do as we walk into the new phase is to earn the trust of the residents, be able to get information from them, and be able to understand not only their economic status, but also the amount of residents that are in each unit. It's a private transaction that has been run by a private company, and therefore there's less information than you'd find if you were buying an asset that had all these other government programs as part of it.
thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything. I mean, I think I know the answer sort of to the question, which you certainly gave, but other people might not understand because it was owned by a private owner. We didn't have the right to go in and look at the units. We didn't. And so we've really had very little ability to say anything much at all about what goes there because it's private property. And now that we're having this relationship with you, Mr. Lynch, we will have a lot more right. And I think we also have someone who wants to make it work, which is a huge difference, and really appreciate that. I just wanted to kind of get that out there because I think there may be some misunderstanding in the community about what we can and can't do, and actually how good this is going to be for us. So, and the residents, for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey. It is privately owned, and so that is the rationale that we need to make sure that our community understands, and we have steps that are coming in the ensuing days and weeks. Mr. Carantonis, then Mr. Dorsey, if that can work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the presentations today and for the very, very hard work. We will get back to thank you again about that. I think we cannot thank you enough for this. I have a question that is related to the protections and to the transition regime over the next year. So part of the idea is that there are rents that are under 60% AMI right now. The idea is that with the present deal, these rents will be frozen for the next year, so there won't be any increases. And then after that, the rents that will have to increase towards the 60% AMI, if they are today below that, they will only be capped in their increase every year 3%. Is that correct? Do I understand it correctly?
Yes, that's correct. So the annual increase will be 3% up to that 60% of area median income rent limit.
Okay. And in the meanwhile, the support, the rental support, and the support that we have been and we continue to provide as eviction protection, et cetera, it will be funded from the funds that we have already earmarked for that and are already in place. Correct?
That is also correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Mr. Dorsey, you may have had your light on already. My apologies. Go to it.
Oh, that's all right. I just wanted to follow up on the line of conversation that Ms. Garvey had, and just a plea, more less so than a question. Given the fact that for 80 years, Barcroft has been operated as a private concern without involvement with government programs for its tenants, there's not going to be, for anybody who lives there, any sort of experience or history with people telling you, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. So given what may be a reluctance within a community that may be dealing with immigration status and other issues, given that the prospective buyer has not actually taken title to the property yet, is that right, Mr. Lynch? So has not had an opportunity to fully exercise due diligence as to the condition of the property and to establish any sort of plan, let alone long-term, but certainly not even an immediate plan for exactly what he is going to do. I just issue a plea for everyone to let him do his work before we all descend with our demands, desires, and requests for doing this, that, or the other thing. If he's going to do it right, he's going to need to be able to take stock, and we're going to need to be able to support him on that. And the best we can all do is to give a reasonable amount of time for that to occur. And so I guess I will back into a question. What would you think is a reasonable amount of time for you to fully take stock of conditions there before you will be open and receptive to the collaborative spirit of Arlingtonians asking you to do stuff?
In days, minutes, and hours? No.
Well, first of all, the suggestions today about taking good surveys of existing, suggestions of understanding the community, all are right in line with what we're doing. So we're very happy to see that there's alignment. You're absolutely right, though. We will have to be careful, and we will have to introduce ourselves. And as you know, walking into someone's home, the first thing you need to do is bear a gift, which is one of the reasons the rent is going to be frozen in 22, to hopefully that opens up a conversation. We're going to have to meet formally and informally with each one of the residents. So it is going to take months as we go through. Many of the leases, believe this is public knowledge, is on a month-to-month lease. And we need to make sure that those transitions are smooth and people are very comfortable with those transitions. But it's going to take several months. And so we have indicated with the county that we would work through this master finance and development plan over the next 12 months through the end of 22. And that's primarily because we have to spend several months, gain that trust, get information, and then be able to create a plan in which we can protect the existing residents that are there.
All right, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. Clearly, you're accountable from the date that you buy it, but I think we can all create some grace to allow the better part of the year to figure out things that I know a lot of people want answers to today. Thank you.
Thank you. And that sort of moves us to what we can say about, without rushing too much, but my impression is both there's description of 10 years as in the staff plan, and I wonder, I guess it's for Mr. Lynch, but also a little bit for Ms. Venezia. With a property this size, you would anticipate phases to the development, and don't know if you, in your experience, if there's any, it's premature probably to say how many phases. I also know there's a commercial component that's separately financed. Are you able to speak at all to kind of the process that you've gone through in other jurisdictions and your development team's kind of approach to developing those phases? And then probably I'll ask you, Ms. Venezia, a little bit about, or Mr. Schwartz, about the CPHD planning and that would take, if you were able to describe a little bit of our process that will apply. But first to Mr. Lynch on, what do you envision on the phasing a little bit, keeping in mind, we don't want to go past Mr. Dorsey's good points and your points.
Right. Well, first, this is a single apartment community, but as indicated earlier, it was built in many different phases. I believe there are 9 sections currently described by the current owner. There are approximately 8 to 10 phases that were built. And so one of the things that we found remarkable is that if they put this community together through 8 or 9 or 10 phases, we may be able to pull it apart and renovate in the same fashion. One of the interesting characteristics that I've noticed when I've walked out there is that there are 11 fairly large chimneys that are on the property. I find them very intriguing. They could be a great wayfinding opportunity, but they represent the 11 boilers and boiler rooms that are on the property. So where you've gone into other complexes and you want to turn the water off or turn the heat off and you affect everyone, we may be isolating those effects to a specific section or phase. That will be our natural tendency to try to replicate that. We also have the existing neighborhood plan and others that are concentrated up near Columbia Pike. Those do split some of the sections, and so we'll have to be very careful about how we break those down. But we do see that there's probably 5 to 7 different phases to be able to achieve the scale, the responsiveness, and also balance the number of vacant units that are on the property so that we can have relocation happen on site.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I guess to Ms. Venezia, Mr. Schwartz, it's a little bit of, to some extent, in the documents, it's laid out that the preservation of affordable housing, some people could think would just mean keeping it exactly the same, which preservation for units from 1939 to 53 is eventually they'll run out. So can you speak a little bit to the development process? And I guess each of those phases would be an opportunity where CPHD would engage, as with the housing division, at least if I understand correctly.
Sure, yes. And so I think a couple of things to comment on there. As Mr. Lynch described, we do have the neighborhoods area plan and conservation areas that are already in effect. The Barcroft community already exists within those. And so just to speak first to that, I think this master financing and development plan that we mentioned, we at the start really want to work within the planning that the community spent years and years already being thoughtful about and thinking about. And so I think we want to try to work primarily within that existing context. And then if we were to deviate from that because there's a really good opportunity to do something different, there would be, of course, extensive community engagement around anything that deviates from that. So again, just to set the stage there on that piece. And then in terms of how we might phase things over time, again, as Mr. Lynch said, and as we mentioned earlier, we really do want to be thoughtful about how we bring different units on at different points in time. We've talked about renovation and we've talked about redevelopment within the conservation areas of the site, which encompasses about 1,100 units, which is the bulk of the units that are at the property. We really want to lead with an opportunity and an eye to rehab and preservation. So trying to preserve as to the extent we can what's there, unless there really is just no feasible way to do that. So we want to keep options open. But again, we want to lead with how can we try to preserve those portions of the site. And then meanwhile, up at the northern parts of the parcel or of the site, closer to the Columbia Pike frontage, that's where you have some more opportunities, and Mr. Snyder referenced this as well, where you really can try to leverage additional density. You can try to, through that, potentially leverage additional sources. That's where we might have some opportunities to do some more mixed income development. That, at the start, again, where we're thinking today on December 14th, is where we might be able to do more of the redevelopment type of pattern. Now, again, all of this would need to go through this process that we want to do next year, and we need to know more about the unit conditions and the building conditions, the residents living there, all of those different things we've been talking about. But again, just to kind of lay the context, we do want to be mindful of what the neighborhood's area plan has already laid out for the property and see what we can do within that in terms of opportunities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Venezia. I don't know, anything to add, Mr. Schwartz? And we'll go to colleagues.
The only thing I wanted to mention, and I can't put a definite time frame on it. As you're aware, we're doing improvements along Columbia Pike with the multimodal project, and the area right in front of Columbia, that Columbia Pike area, over the next few years, depending on how we are working on getting easements, there will be significant county investment along that part of the Pike to make that similar to the other parts of the Pike we've worked on. So it will not just be over the next 5 years that we'll be working internally to that site with Mr. Lynch, but the county will also have significant investments we'll be making along the Pike and improvements. So this will be offer many opportunities for many county staff to be engaged.
Full employment for CPHD. So, yes, Ms. Crystal.
Thank you. This is just, the planning opportunity is tremendously exciting. I really associate myself with that. And I think Mr. Snyder's comments too really indicated for those who helped author and put fingerprints on the form-based code and then ultimately the neighborhoods plan. And for those of us who are just fortunate enough to live in the neighborhood, the opportunity to really think comprehensively, not only with Mr. Lynch's vision of that mix of amenities and programming that really supports housing as a launch pad to opportunity, I think as you described, but also as our manager was indicating that the significant investments in public works that the county is making, to say nothing of everything that we have learned in the years since from biophilic design and so on. So I'm trying to, that is the sort of thing we get incredibly excited about, and it is very much in the future, but I can't help but be thrilled to talk about it. One of the things I did want to ask, sort of similar, right? We've talked about the next step if the sale is completed, being both the master planning effort, but also the master finance restructure or the master financing deal. And I wondered, certainly like planning, so many of those specifics would be to be understood in the future. But I do think, for most of us, we're probably most familiar when it comes to loans with affordable housing with sort of the residual receipts model, right? We make a loan from our AHIF, we get paid back out of residual receipts. And you were indicating, Ms. Venezia, in your presentation about the estimates that we're making about our debt service, assume some restructuring of debt, recognizing how much is still to be determined. Can you just help us understand a little more the potential for this to differ from a kind of more straightforward AHIF loan paid back through residual receipts type of arrangement with which we're more familiar?
Yes, and so I think really one of the opportunities that may arise through these future deals is as we're able to introduce additional sources into the projects. So for instance, one of the sources that we'll be able to introduce as renovation and redevelopment are both considered is tax credits. That's a tool that we use on many of our projects in Arlington. The difference, I think, in this situation is that if and when tax credit equity comes in to help with some of the phasing and some of the redevelopment and renovation of the projects, typically in most of our other projects, the county then comes in as the sole gap financer on the back end. So all the other sources are considered, and then the county fund loan is the final source. In this particular situation, we are very fortunate that Amazon has come in to share that gap. And so in a typical deal where the county might have to put in the full amount of that gap, we would, in this situation, have an opportunity to share that gap with another financing partner that would also be subordinate. And so that, I think, is probably the most tremendous opportunity. But also, too, in addition to tax credits, I think what we want to do next year during this planning process is really look at the full breadth of opportunities for resources that could be brought into the project, not just for affordable housing, but really for all the different aspects of the parcel. And so that's one of the things that we want to explore with Mr. Lynch. And I see him nodding, so that's a good sign, is as there are other potentially infrastructure funds or other resources that really benefit the whole of the site, the whole of the parcel, could there be offsets to some of the costs on the affordable pieces as well? And so that's one of the things we want to think really creatively. Again, think outside of our affordable housing box. So I'll be leaning a lot on our other partners within the county and outside of the county so that we're looking beyond our usual tools to really see what else is out there. But even if none of that comes to fruition, the fact that we'll have another gap financing partner, which is Amazon, helping us share in what gap remains is really tremendous and cannot be understated in this case.
Thank you, Ms. Venezia. And I think we're getting towards the place of a motion. We'll go to Mr. Carantonis and then Mr. Dorsey. We do still have, I appreciate the patience of everyone in the room. Some of these items feel it wise to just spell out a little bit in our discussion, even though many will be aware of this. But Mr. Carantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to be brief. It's not a small detail. It's outside the contract. I mean, the financing part. It's about the little commercial strip where, very cherished retail, neighborhood retail is residing. It is also affordable retail. So can you tell us something at all about your plans about that, Mr. Lynch?
The commercial components are very interesting at this location. There's actually 2,500 linear feet along Columbia Pike with 5 signalized intersections. And while you have certain components that help a healthy neighborhood, like a grocery store across the street, primary care, there's also plenty of gems of small local retail that are along the Pike. And we've worked in corridors like the U Street corridor in DC, the H Street corridor, and we've always found that the local gems are the vibrancy that comes with any retail programming. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about the mix between local programming and national. And so we are very excited about the opportunity to make sure that the existing retailers and other retailers that are incubating somewhere out there on the Pike, that we can bring them to this location, because we think there's a great opportunity to create a tremendous node or a hub along the Pike, as we'll be able to develop at least 2 corners on the main intersection. And I think that in itself will really bring excitement and vibrancy that will spill into the other residential components of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Carantonis. Mr. Dorsey, I think we may be moving towards a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I offer this motion not to stop continued discussion and debate, but I wasn't sensing any of us had any fundamental issues with the recommendation, so we might as well get that on the table and not keep all these good folks in suspense. So I move that the county board adopt the county manager's recommendations that are contained in 32A and B, which specifically are to allocate $150 million of loan proceeds in general fund non-departmental to the Barcroft project, which is a 1,334 unit garden apartment complex located at 1130 South George Mason Drive, and that we also approve the terms of what is the substantially final attached county acquisition fund loan documents for said $150 million loan to the 1130 South George Mason Drive Reyes Owner LLC, an entity affiliated with Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners. And for item 32B, that the Arlington County Board adopt the county manager's recommendation to approve the attached resolution authorizing the county to issue revenue notes to finance the acquisition of certain land, equipment, and other projects on a revolving credit basis, that we appropriate $150 million in loan proceeds to finance the Barcroft acquisition plan, and that we appropriate $0.85 million from unallocated AHIP balances to cover debt service for the remainder of the fiscal year 2022, which is approximately 6 months. And that is the recommendation contained in Board Report 32B.
Second. We got seconds, thirds, seconds. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, and then we might have a little more discussion, of course.
Sure. Yeah. I'll speak to it briefly. Clearly, the manager prefaced this conversation several days ago by calling this transformative. When I was elected to the board these many years ago, I identified it to him through conversation as one of my big priorities, as Mr. Snyder mentioned before. The entire plan for Columbia Pike in terms of unit preservation and the mix entirely hinges on Barcroft. It is not workable. The math does not work if Barcroft doesn't work. So this is clearly important. And when we think about this deal, this partnership, none of us knew years ago when this property came up to be disposed of what it would look like. But from everything that we know now, this is really the realization of not only our absolute pain points and pressure points, but the realization of really a lot of our hopes and dreams. So that's something that is thrilling. And I won't conclude all of my remarks, but to say that this is a really big deal. I'm thankful for all the great words that we've had from our public. And I'll note that even some of our chief critics were working hard not to say good job. So that was very interesting. But let's continue to have conversation on this.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. I'll have a question, but go ahead first, Ms. Garvey.
Well, I'm actually ready sort of for concluding remarks. So why don't you do your questions and things? I don't think I have any particular questions right
Sure. Thank you. So it's really just one. We have not spoken in extensive detail on 32B, and just wanted to kind of, I think this is a general question, but it's sort of for Ms. Cowan or Mr. Freeze. Can you just describe a little bit? We have a first-year commitment of AHIF. Then we have a interest rate that proceeds for, I believe, the following 5 years, and then an interest rate that goes up if development has not proceeded. A 1% change in interest rates can mean a significant difference. Can you just sort of speak to how the 32B and that portion of it is seeking to protect financially the investment we're making? And that's a pretty general question, but if you could just sort of describe what you structured with the AHIF initially and then the 1% and the 2.5%.
So if I could speak initially, though, to the line of credit itself. So in order to secure the $150 million to contribute to this acquisition, we extended an agreement that we have subject to your approval with PNC Bank, which gave us easy access to this $150 million. And the great thing about this line of credit is that it's very flexible. So you heard Ms. Venezia and Mr. Lynch discuss how we'll be going through this long-term planning process and over a 10-year redevelopment phase to figure out what the sources of financing are, with the potential that it would buy down the county's investment then in the property, right, the $150 million loan. And so this line of credit is very flexible and allows for prepayment so that it could reduce that long-term obligation. And so that's the rationale for what we did there. Now, the interest rate on the AHIF loan, which is great about this initial investment, is that it's a hard pay loan of 1%, as you noted, in the first 5 years. And that initially, and certainly for the first year, given what we know about the interest rate on the line of credit, will largely cover the majority of debt service in FY22, with the balance, if there's any delta, coming from AHIF as well. And then similarly, we expect the same in 23, as long as there's not a significant increase in interest rates. So that was part of the rationale for doing that. And then once we get through the long-term finance plan, we'll have a better sense of how we should structure the county's loan or the line of credit, right? You know what I mean? Do we lock in part of it? Do we not? And so that's how we put the overall deal together. The rationale for the increasing interest rate after 5 years on the AHIF loan in some ways followed the Amazon deal, and just to keep everyone motivated for that redevelopment, an incentive to get that redevelopment of the property going, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I think there's language that seeks to reflect that we cannot plan. We have planned for eventualities and protected the county, but there has to be, we cannot guarantee the order of things. I believe there's one estimate, maybe you could speak to a little bit, that in the most challenging of scenarios, or this could result in approximately a commitment that might range $5 to $7 million in AHIF funding, just so that we're transparent with our public verbally in addition to in our staff report?
Sure. So, based on Mr. Lynch's team have been really great about providing us with the super preliminary, what they learned from the borrower and what the whole deal would look like. And so they've been really great about that. And when we look at those numbers and what the possible scenarios could be for LIHTC financing or these other, financing sources that we could bring to the table, and then we look at what the county's long-term debt would be and we roll that out, it could be $5 to $7 million annually. And that could be the number. Now, it could be better or it could be worse. There's a lot. We put this deal together very quickly. I think we had a great team working on it, and we'll see once we get through this next year and go through this longer-term process what that exact number is.
Thank you, Ms. Cowan. Other questions on the financing? I may have belabored it more than necessary, but Mr. Dorsey.
I'll just take the opportunity for my concluding remarks. This has really been one where we've spent a lot of time talking about Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners and Arlington County's role in all of this. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a little bit air to the role of the organization that would come before us if we were all listing alphabetically, Amazon. So Amazon, as many people know, has a $2 billion housing equity fund that they are going to invest in their communities here, Nashville, Washington, and that was a big deal when it was announced. And with that came a commitment and a desire to get 20,000 units with that $2 billion investment. If you do the math, that's about $100,000 a unit. Amazon is all in on this deal at a little bit more than $100,000 per unit. So we thank you all for making the stretch and for realizing the value in this. And we really know that without your providing below market capital in addition to our below market capital, we could be dealing with a very, very different result. So thank you. And with that, we've had a lot of conversation from people in our community wondering, why did this have to happen so fast? And why couldn't you share more with us? And couldn't you push the closing date? And I want to remind people that this wasn't just simply one side negotiating with a buyer. This was a competitive process, like years ago in the housing market where they were escalating offers upon escalating officers. Well, that's what we were dealing with here. So Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners had to put together a package that could offer the cleanest possible terms for closing at the highest possible premium price. So all of those desires to do the Arlington thing of sitting with it and deliberating some more, wasn't going to happen. So we needed to act in the best interest of our community. I feel confident that we've done so in a way that, quite frankly, is going to help stabilize our community. And really, that's where I just get really excited about this deal. In the near term, we have talked about the fact that there will be no displacement, that households will be stabilized, which means kids will be able to go to school where they've previously been going to school, that the pandemic will not exacerbate bad outcomes, that job security won't be threatened. We've got a situation where their middle-term security is even more certain than it was before, because they'll have the availability and offer of longer-term leases. This deal brings with it the capitalization to make sure that the deferred and ongoing maintenance needs are going to be better addressed. This is a very, very, very good deal for people who live at Barcroft Apartments, and of that I am most grateful. Mr. Reyes, we thank you very much for reminding us all about Arna Valley. I think the trauma, and I don't use that word lightly, that went into all that occurred there has very much informed our ability to respond favorably this time around, and I appreciate your recognizing that. As I mentioned before, Barcroft is essential to the Columbia Pike community. Without a favorable disposition of it, Columbia Pike really doesn't work as the community that engaged in planning its long-term future desired. So this is wonderful to stabilize the community. And as Ms. Marlene mentioned on the team's call, fiscally prudent people can look at this and see a lot to love as well. $100,000 per unit for our subsidy is fantastic for what we do when we consider all manner of affordable housing deals in our community. And when we look at the financing package that Ms. Cowan talked about, it's really reflective of the county's creditworthiness overall that we were able to execute such favorable terms very, very quickly. So I'll try to speed through this. Mr. Lynch, and on behalf of, I hope you will accept to your entire team my gratitude and thanks for, a lot that you're going to bring to this table. Principally, I love that you are interested in looking at your new community and finding the talent from within to help with the overall, not only operations of the place, but the planning for its future. That's really an exemplification of what we mean by equity in looking at people and talent, and I love it. And, I realize that we've got this hugely long and complicated loan document that outlines the terms and conditions that our resources come with. But I want to, say sincerely that we look forward to hearing what your approaches are to placemaking and community and capacity building, because I hope from your varied development experiences elsewhere that we'll have a lot to learn as well that we can incorporate for the rest of our county. And, look, to everyone else, just as I mentioned before, please give them time. This was for 80 years, this was a black box to the wider community, and now that it's going to be opened up, please don't take advantage of that by not letting us do our best work. So hopefully I make the plea for patience, and for all of those who would have loved to have dug into this more, I do sincerely appreciate that. We've got a lot of people in Arlington who probably could have made a contribution if they had gotten into this and deliberated over it for a while before. But, $500 million deals are hard enough. I mean, in this one, I counted 10 pages of definitions alone in our loan agreement, which is crazy. Clearly, we could not have negotiated that with the community. So I will just trust that as people pore over this over the weeks ahead, they will come to the conclusion that we absolutely need to do this, and we're getting to do it under pretty good terms. And thank you for indulging me in being long-winded.
No, thank you, Mr. Dorsey, for starting our concluding comments. Ms. Garvey.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is the season for gift giving and celebrating. It feels really right. I got on the board in 2012, March, actually, I'm almost 10 years, which is interesting. And I very quickly, I'd been on the school board, so I looked at education. I very quickly kind of dived into things a little bit, land use. And I got to this real quick shorthand. I had two worries, NSA and Barcroft Apartments. NSA was the shorthand for our commercial vacancy rate. We lost NSA, but we got Amazon. Thank you, Amazon. Better than NSA if it has to be. I would like to have both, but, it's great. Thank you. And now Barcroft. I've been worrying about Barcroft for 10 years. So thank you very much. This may not be the solution, but it's really exciting. As Ms. Crystal said, it's so exciting for planners. Arlingtonians really like to plan. We do a lot of planning. We also like to be in the forefront of things, and often I think being in the forefront is maybe not the best place to be. You can make mistakes and stuff, but on something like this, I think we really want and need to be in the forefront. Nobody has figured out how to do affordable housing in a popular popular urban area. I don't think anywhere in the world. And the idea of coming in and creating a community. I loved what you said about creating communities, not buildings. And you said that your customers are residents and families, not tenants. And that's just a really great way to start. You've met some of our people here. Mr. Reyes can help you a lot in talking with people. You've probably met him already, which is great. We've got a lot of people who are active. Some of this came from some places along the Pike. We had some treats with Mr. Takis's swearing in. Maybe we could give we will give you one of these. It's delicious. And you'll stop by Cafe Saison right there on Columbia Pike. It's great. You're going to love it here. You're going to love it here. Anyway, I'm just delighted that you're here. The one thing I want to warn you about is trees. We're really big on saving trees, and there's some gorgeous trees there. So as you work on the amenities, pools, tot lots, and all of that, which so needed for that community. Anyway, just remember the trees. And I could go on for quite a long time. I think we're probably going to have a fairly long relationship. I think you're going to be here for a while. This is a great community. And I'm just excited. I think this partnership between Amazon and you and the county and our community and really bringing in the people who live here sometimes it's like, what a strange concept. You talk to the people who actually live here about what they need. I mean, that's the way it should be done, but it often is not. So thank you so very much for coming. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garvey, for your comments, for your wisdom. I feel like I've been mentored a little bit. Appreciate it.
I'm really old.
No. Fantastic. Thank you for all the comments. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lynch, good to see you again. I tried to remember when it was last time that we were in the same room, and it was about 10 years ago, 2011 exactly. And back then you were actually touring Columbia Pike, some of these risk properties, as it was my job to present them to you and to make you aware what the county board of that time, what the community wanted to see happening there, and what the project envisioned by the Columbia Pike Initiative, of which this is the 22nd year. So I'm very happy that this investment paid off and that you are back and taking this very courageous decision. And that's true also for us. So to our fellow taxpayers and to our fellow residents in Arlington, this was a really, really big decision. This is a really big decision. And none across this dice has taken that easily. And I know that on the staff side, I will come to that a little bit later, even less so. So there is a lot of work and thought behind that, also a lot of hope. And talking about hope, I want to assure our residents, our taxpayers, that actually this is investment. This is not subsidy. This is investment. There is a positive side on this balance sheet, and it's mighty. We're enabling reinvestment in a very compact, big, but very compact campus that has momentous development potential. And of course, it retains its value-added capacity, and it has even increased that over time. If I were your investor, Mr. Lynch, I would feel quite comfortable tonight, actually, at the prospect of what is going to happen in Barcroft both in a profitable way for you, but also in a profitable way in all possible dimensions for our community as well. The size and the economies of scale of this campus are absolutely unique. Definitely unique in Northern Virginia, I believe unique in the general context of the metropolitan region. We are getting to retain in Arlington significant essential workforce, including some county employees, namely police officers and others. This property, by the way, will also be paying taxes. This is not like they're not. And so much more. So this board, I believe, and at least I start there, I'm not only interested, you hear it from a housing advocate, I'm not only interested in the preservation of affordable housing. I am equally interested in the contribution of this development, future development, and of this phased development plan to take Columbia Pike to the place envisioned by the Columbia Pike Initiative. On Columbia Pike, there are 40,000 Arlingtonians living, 1 out of 4. The riskiest properties also present the biggest opportunities here. Barcroft should not continue to be a bedroom community. It should be a community, a desirable place to live. In 10 years from now, I really envision Barcroft to be a place where we will be inviting people from across the nation, maybe across the world, to show them what we did, to get them to visit Arlington because of that. So back to those who have worked so much about this, on this. So Ms. Venezia, Ms. Rizzo, Ms. Stanovsky, I cannot thank you enough for all the work that you invested, and you will be continuing to invest in this. The county attorney's office, the unsung heroes of this as well, Ms. Hefferman and Ms. Kaur, and everybody who has been supporting you. It is really tough to pull this off. We understand that. And this is really something I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to also name some people who are not in the room today, but they were in the room before, some of them. Those who have been working on the neighborhoods plan, the Columbia Pike neighborhoods plan. When we talk about was the community aware of that, or was the community involved? Well, I can tell you that by 2011, 10 years from back, there was a thorough process that went through all scenarios, including the scenario we're living today. We actually estimated back then that the gap financing would be about $73,000. I remember that still. For 10 years before, this is not such a bad prediction. So Inta Malis was the chair of this committee. Kathleen McSweeney was on this committee. Reed Goldstein, who is the vice chair of our school board today, was on this committee, and myself. I also saw for a moment here in the Teams meeting Mr. Matusek, who was a planner back then, and Ms. Jennifer Smith. So this is a right moment to thank them for their work as well. And so to thank Ms. Cowan and the entire team of the county manager's office. We know that they have been working on this as well. And last but not least, Amazon. I have to tell you, it is a very big investment that you're making, and it's very appreciated. I consider that not only as a strategic investment, but actually a partnership that is forming. And if I look at what happened this year, Crystal House was another one, significant. And we did some more, Mr. Chair, in this year. Greenbrier, Park Shirlington, and now Barcroft. I do believe that closing this December, that we are presenting to Arlingtonians a very solid commitment of their political leadership, something that the voters have rewarded, that we are serious about preserving affordable housing in Arlington. We are not done, though. The size of this commitment just reflects the size of the problem. So we will keep working on this. Thank you so much. I will, of course, support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis. Ms. Crystal.
Thank you. I want to echo Mr. Karantonis' comments about the magnitude. With the possible exclusion of the water pollution control plant, although I think that was made through multiple actions of the board, I think this is perhaps the largest single appropriation this board has ever voted on anything, not just affordable housing. And there are opportunity costs for these funds. The debt service alone will have impacts on our annual operating budget. It will, in other ways, constrain our affordable housing portfolio. And it's important to acknowledge the size and the magnitude of that. This is that important. This is an action that is so important to our community as a whole, to all of our affordable housing goals, to all of our goals for the future of Columbia Pike, and for the realization of the community vision that Mr. Karantonis talked about so compellingly. $150 million stretches the county so far. It is so much money, and there is still a gap because of the size of this project. And so I just want to join my colleagues in calling out the fact that we can draw a direct line from Amazon's investment at $160 million in this project to the fact that tenants will not be displaced, that our neighbors will stay in their homes. If it were not for the involvement of Amazon, if Amazon were not here in Arlington County and part of this community and is committed to keeping this community intact as we are, this community wouldn't be staying intact. So we're joined tonight by a few members, Mr. Stout, Ms. Buell, Mr. Swift, and Mr. Benston, and we're so glad to have your partnership. I think it's the understatement of the day to say that Amazon has done the right thing here, and now it's on all of us to execute. I also have been, thinking and remarking that we've been so fortunate to have a mission-driven buyer here and partner in Mr. Lynch, which is so true, and we're so excited to work with you. And if I can maybe torture that metaphor a little bit, we're also so fortunate to have a mission-driven county staff, because as my colleagues have echoed, as our manager has echoed, I mean, this has been a burn the midnight oil for about 6 weeks straight type of project. And that mission drivenness has been as true of our attorneys and our management and finance analysts as it's been of our housing staff and human services leads. It's truly taken an amazing team working around the clock in close collaboration with your team, Mr. Lynch, to get us to this point, and I am so grateful for them. And I'll speak a little bit personally for a moment, just in closing, as a Douglas Park resident who's just a couple blocks away from the Barcroft Apartments, how much it meant to me, Mr. Lynch, as I think it did to Ms. Garvey, to hear you describe folks not as tenants but as families. These families at Barcroft, these are my son's playmates at Doctors Run Park, and in a couple of Septembers, they'll be his classmates at Randolph Elementary School. And it's just so meaningful to have a partner who sees these families, as Arlingtonians, as true drivers of our community, and I feel lucky to live in their neighborhood. And I'm so glad to know that we will be able to for many years to come. And to just conclude, I was thinking as Ms. Venezia so compellingly described the way the equity questions map onto the analysis that staff has done, that kind of final question of what did we do, right? That's the equity question we're asking ourselves now, but what did we do? That's also the question that history will ask of us, this board, this staff, our partners, when it came time to preserve the largest market rate affordable housing complex in this community, and with it, preserve so much of what makes the Pike an amazing place. And I am thrilled to be able to take this vote and to be able to answer that question so affirmatively tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. Want to say thank you to staff and Venezia. I've tried to make sure that nothing else, so little, you're doing so much, and just a huge thank you. You've been relentless. I don't know whether Brenda Heffernan is here, but a huge thank you to Ms. Kaur and Brenda Heffernan for all of the work. There's so many different people that had to work over the last month, virtually nonstop, and every moment there's issues at play. And just a huge thank you to our attorneys, Ms. Cowan and DMF. Thank you so much. I hope it's okay to say that I'm hoping that there will be some long nights of sleep, because I know you've been working so hard, and the entire team. Just a huge thank you. Thanks as well to the rest of the housing team, Melissa Donosky and Sarah Pizzo, and to Erica Moore and Bryna Helfer. You've been working a ton, and also to our manager for the vision to help make this orchestra work on our staff side. To Mr. Lynch, there are 185 pages in 32A, and there are good 60 or so pages in 32B. You know that, first, a huge thank you. You also know that these pages can cover in broad terms the relationship that we're starting, but not in total. And I am very heartened by your commitment, I'm confident, without being certain, that we're going to work together through the process of the 5 to 7 different development pieces, and families will be respected, and we will build on this community. To Amazon, the Crystal Houses was $381.5 million that you made as a commitment to our community that was part of the Housing Equity Fund and meeting the moment. But this is perhaps different and maybe hardest, because this is an existing set of units that is that we have still to do a census on. And so this is not easy, but this is exactly the partnership that we could have only hoped for at the best of what we were doing. And the partnerships mean that things get detailed, and you might not agree on every point at every moment, but you agree to commit, as I know resonates, and I hope resonates with the leadership and the partners that really we have in our community. So I can't say this is perhaps the most grateful I am with respect to the partnership on this, because I agree with Ms. Crystal that, but for your partnership, there's nothing inevitable about this private property staying affordable. I do have to say, I think it's important just to mention, Mr. Reyes is right, that there's a long road that is still left to go, and we will have to live our values every second. I'm very pleased to answer Mr. Spain's questions regarding relocation guidelines. It's in the document. I also think that it's critical that we work on a census. That's been covered a couple of times. I will wrap up just by saying this is, I think Mr. Snyder said, we are celebrating the opportunity to get to start. And we still have to close, and we still have to then start. And Mr. Dorsey's right that we ask for time. But you know, between 1939 and 1953, when these were built, this was the middle class. This was the way to make your way up the economic ladder. And what we are asking and what we are doing tonight is our chance at history to keep making that real for as many people as we possibly can on this night. So I said when I voted for, at different times I've said we got to close the distance between the way the world is and the way the world should be, and this vote absolutely does it. So with that, the question is on Mr. Dorsey's motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations to all of you who have worked night after night. I hope you get a minute's rest, and thank you.